Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So inshallah ta'ala, first and foremost, just to kind of reiterate, tonight inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to address the other aspect of today's khutbah al-Jum'ah. Today in khutbah al-Jum'ah, we talked about the concept of being a silent devil. The Prophet ﷺ called it Shaytan al-Akhwas. The person who gives implicit approval to any action that is not beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And with that, you've got so many different categories. So obviously today we were focusing on the concept of injustice, and we were looking at it from that angle. That a person who stands by and who watches another person, have injustice or transgression committed against him and not do anything about it, then that person is just as guilty as the doer. And subhanAllah, from a standpoint of injustice, it's obvious, right? If three people are, and I mentioned something that was really chilling. I was mentioning, this article that came on Yahoo. I don't know if you guys saw it, just a few days ago actually, and it was called "The Loss of Humanity." The Loss of Humanity, and they were showing this 2-year-old girl in Beijing, Chinese girl. Any of you guys saw that video? Runs into the street, and a van runs her over in front of everybody. Slows down, and then, tries to, obviously he's hesitating whether he should get out or not, and then just keeps going. Then another man runs her over, right? And there were 18 bystanders. No one said anything, no one did anything, no one even shrieked. Everyone just looked to the side, saw the dead baby as if it's a dead animal, and kept walking. Until the mother, as the article said, that the parents own a hardware store, on the side on that street, and they didn't realize the baby had went outside, and then the mother goes out and she has to scrape her daughter off of the ground. SubhanAllah, the loss of humanity, right? And then I mentioned, also, you have all these news stories coming out in the last year. The woman that was sitting in a hospital in Brooklyn in the waiting room, in the emergency room, and then for over 24 hours, no one came to assist her. Then she died and she rolled off of the chair and she was laying on the ground. And they showed video surveillance of people just coming and looking at her. She's dead. No one does anything to help her for hours. Right? The loss of humanity. And this is essentially what the Messenger ﷺ mentioned as one of the ends as one of the signs of the end of time. And this is something that's very significant. We spent the whole khutbah talking about that. When hearts become so hard, and we even went, I mentioned from Fath al-Qadir, from Imam al-Shawkani, rahimahullah, the Tafsir Surah Al-Fajr, when Allah is talking about Ad and Thamud, these huge tribes, advanced, that had these huge bodies that used to build these huge pillars and were, and this great construction Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala employed them with, and Hud alayhi salam comes to them, and Hud alayhi salam reminds them, this is the mercy of Allah upon you, this is His blessing, you should be thanking Him for this strength, you should be thanking Him for this advancement. But instead they disobeyed Allah, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punished them with natural disaster. Right? Wind and power just coming and taking them until they were like dried up, trees, decomposed, left on the ground to dry. Then Thamud, their descendants came, same thing. Thamud had the smarts, and they were advanced in that they could literally, Jabu Sakhra bil Wad, just like we say jade, just like a pocket in the Arabic language, they could make flawless, caves, flawless sculptures inside of, or not sculptures, they can sculpt their caves inside, inside of these huge stones, inside of these boulders, fancy architecture, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed them too. And Allah destroyed Fir'aun, who had a lot of blessings, who Fir'aun, combined all of those things in one man. He was a powerful nation in and of himself. Fir'aun was also smart, right? Obviously not when it came to deed, but he was considered to be a smart person. He could torture human beings without being held accountable. And Allah says the result of all of this advancement of mankind, فَأَكْثَرُوا فِيهَا الْفَسَادِ, that more corruption came. Right? Which is the irony of this all. Despite the buildings advancing, despite the strength, despite the power of the nations, the one thing that continued to decay was morality. And as a result of that, Shawkani rahimahullah says, you had more murder, you had more rape, you had more theft, you had all of this fasad creep in. Even though they were becoming more and more advanced, these things were destroying them from the inside. And essentially what the mindset that people have is that every man for himself. And this is what we've come to today, every man for himself. Everyone minds his own business. What connection do I have with the people of Libya? Right? I didn't care about them. If I was alive for all 42 years, I didn't care about them for 42 years, but I found it exciting when Gaddafi got killed, so I went and tried to find all the news reports and see the videos and see how exactly he was killed, because this is exciting news. But I didn't care the rest of the time. I didn't care about the people of Syria the rest of the time. I didn't care about Egypt. I didn't care about Palestine until something exciting happened. That was newsworthy for me. You know, that this was something for me to watch, to keep up with. But essentially, people just mind their own business. What do I care about Somalia? What do I care about all these people dying of famine and hunger? Africa always has problems. What connection do I have to them? Right? So on a global level, we've learned to become very desensitized human beings, and it's only getting worse. On a local level, if you know someone is committing a transgression against someone else and you don't come to that person's aid, then you are just as guilty as the one who was committing that action. Right? And then we took the hadith of the Messenger ﷺ, and this is the other angle that I want to look at it from, where the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever sees amongst you an evil action, let him change it with his hand. And if he can't do it with his hand, let him speak out against it. If he can't speak out against it, then he should hate it in his heart, and that is the weakest, ad'aful iman. That's the weakest form of iman. When you don't say anything, but you hate it on the inside. Obviously, one form of munkar, one form of evil is injustice. What else does this hadith refer to? What else is evil? What else is part of munkar? Think about it. What else is evil other than injustice? Sin, right? Sin. It's not that hard. Any sin is part of munkar. You know, witnessing a sin, being a witness to a sin being committed openly and not doing anything about it. That also falls into this hadith. That's also a scope of this hadith. Right? I see someone doing something and I don't say anything about it. And I think that as long as I'm not doing it and I'm not committing that same sin, I'm not guilty. That person has to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't have anything to do with it. You know what? I don't have to say anything. You know what? On top of that, I can even hang out with that person. I can even be with that person all the time while he's committing that sin. But I don't have to say anything about it. I don't have to do anything about it. Right? And that makes you what? Shaytan a mute, silent devil. You're just as guilty as that person because you didn't stop him. You didn't get in the way. And in fact, if you look at some of that hadith, I want you to think about this. You know, in the time of Omar ibn Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah ta'ala, in his seerah, there's an incident that took place where there was a group of young men caught drinking alcohol. And think about this. One of the people that was with them was Sa'im, not this one. He was fasting. The seerah says he was fasting. Right? Think about this. A guy is fasting. It was a Thursday. Everybody else is drinking, but he didn't say anything. He was just fasting. So they brought them to Omar ibn Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah, and Omar rahimahullah said, "Watch them all." He said, "What about the guy who was fasting?" He said, "He's just as guilty." Because the one who witnesses shahadat az-zur, the one who witnesses falsehood, who watches it, doesn't do anything about it, is just as guilty as the doer himself. And he also mentioned the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam that no one should sit at a table where alcohol is being served. You know, Tabarani, right? I remember a khatib, you know, someone was telling me a khatib in Jum'ah, like a speaker in Jum'ah, said sometimes I'm the designated driver, and he was proud of that. Like, my friends drink, but I don't drink. It doesn't work that way, buddy. You can't be the designated driver, and you can't be at the table with that person. You can't be implicitly approving of that action. So by sitting there, even if you yourself are not drinking, the Prophet ﷺ said he incurs the sin too. Because he's sitting at the table while wine's being served, so he's indicating to those people he really doesn't have a problem with what they're doing. He's letting it go. Right? And then take it a step further. Not only are we sometimes implicitly approving of things, sometimes you're actually assisting in a way. Right? And it can be very, very, very small things. But again, the example of alcohol, because the Arabs were huge drinkers. So the Prophet ﷺ stressed many different aspects of this. Alcohol. Rasulullah ﷺ, who did he curse? The one who drinks, the one who sells. Who else? Only youth. The one who pours it, the one who it's poured for, the one who carries it, the one who it's carried to, all the way to the one who makes who takes the grapes. You know, the one who provides the grapes that will be used to make that alcohol. If he knew what it was going to be provided for. obviously, if he knew what was going to happen as a result of that. That's a scary hadith. Because sometimes I myself might not be committing the action, but somehow I'm in that chain that provided, that set the atmosphere, set the mood for that person to commit that sin. And I didn't do anything about it. I let him do it. In fact, I might have been a part of it. It could be something as simple as commenting on someone's Facebook picture. Right? You know, subhanAllah, I remember one of the sisters sent me actually an email this week, and she said, what's the ruling on, posting pictures of yourself on Facebook? And that kind of stuff. And I was like, no, you can't do it. Guys are going to be looking at your picture, all that kind of stuff, yada, yada, yada. She said, okay, what if I comment on girls who don't wear hijab, and I tell them how beautiful they look on Facebook? You're assisting in that sin. You're boosting her head, you're boosting her ego, you're telling her what she's doing is good. You're implicitly approving of what she's doing. It's a small thing, right? It might fly under the radar, but you're approving of some form of haram, and you're definitely not speaking out against it, right? It's one thing to go and to send a private message and say, look, I saw your Facebook page, and I really don't think you should do this. Just a gentle reminder, because I love you, because you're my brother, because you're my sister. I really don't think this is appropriate for you. You don't want to expose yourself. Maybe Allah will forgive you, inshallah. Maybe you'll get over this. You can remove these things and stuff like that, just for the sake of Allah. You'll be rewarded, inshallah. Gently. That's one thing. Another thing is just staying neutral and just blocking them from your newsfeed. Right? And I'm just going to pretend this doesn't exist. Then a third thing is actually congratulating them on their sins. Think about that. Congratulating them on their sins. You're implicitly approving of their actions. Somehow, you're implicitly approving. Right? So every single time we're sitting around, and unfortunately, Omar ibn Khattab, he said, I seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the day that the sinner is not ashamed of his sin, but the muhsin, the one who does good, is ashamed of his good deed. Right? We're sitting around in a car. If you put on your nasheeds, he's going to criticize you. You're going to get attacked. You're going to be called lame. You're going to be called stupid. You're going to be called all kinds of names. But if he busts his music, I can't say anything because I don't want to be judgmental. SubhanAllah, since when did we become shy? Since when is the da'i to Allah supposed to be more shy than the da'i to shaitan? Right? That I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to offend you. This person can publicly and unashamedly just do whatever they want. And you won't say anything. In fact, you'll be too embarrassed to even indicate with your eyes or with your facial expression that you don't like what they're doing. But at the same time, you're embarrassed to go pray in the corner whenever you're with them. Think about that for a moment. Who's winning that battle there? Who's really winning that battle there? And that's a very, very, very scary thing. And I want us, it always goes back to our company. And I was thinking a lot about what the advice was that I wanted to leave. SubhanAllah, I'm going to be gone for a long time. So I was like, what advice, what I really want to leave with the youth before I leave? And it always goes back to friends. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions in the Quran, al-akhillah, those close friends, this dunya, they are enemies to each other on the day of judgment. They're fighting each other. Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, Ibn Kathir has a narration about him. He says that he commented on this ayah in this way. Ali ibn Abi Talib, he based it off of a hadith of Ibn Abbas from the Prophet ﷺ, speaking about the way that a person is in the grave. Right? A person, when he sees his relatives' actions in the grave, if they're good and that person is good, he makes dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can't speak to the people that are good. You don't have any communication with them. But they would ask Allah to prolong that person's life. Right? And until they die being guided. If you have a good family member. So Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, the best friendship is the one that when one of the friends leaves this world, and he dies a salih, he dies a righteous person, and he meets Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, do not allow my friend so-and-so to die until he's been guided to what I have been guided to. He used to command me to obey you and the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He used to lead me to the truth. And Ali radiallahu ta'ala said he would be told that if you knew the situation of your friend, you would cry a little and you would laugh a lot. Meaning what? He's going to be in a good situation. And when he passes away, that those two souls are united. As believing souls are united. And he said the worst friendship is the one whenever a friend dies, and that friend was upon disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whenever he dies, he says, oh Allah, do not let my friend so-and-so die until he dies in the same miserable situation that I was in. Until he's guided, until he's led astray the same way that I was led astray. And whenever he joins, and then he makes, he actually makes dua against his friend in a way of cursing him. He says, he led me to disobey Allah and His Messenger. I'm paraphrasing, it's a long narration. He led me to disobey Allah and His Messenger. He didn't stop me. He didn't let anything, he let me do it, and he was part of it. And whenever he dies, those two friends, they curse each other, and they would curse each other for all of eternity in hellfire. You did this, you did that, why didn't you stop me? Why didn't you say anything? Why did you do this? Why did you leave me to this? Why did you leave me to do that? Constant fighting and bickering. And subhanAllah, I was just thinking, and I'm going to end with this inshallah ta'ala. Beautiful, beautiful ayat, but very terrifying. And we always mention it, and every time I mention these ayat, I talk about another aspect of it, because the tafsirs of this ayat are amazing. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيَوْمَ يَعْبُدُ الظَّالِمُ عَلَى يَدَيْهِ يَقُولُ يَا لَيْتَنِي اتَّخَذْتُ مَعَ رَسُولِ سَبِيلًا. When the transgressor would be swallowing, biting on his hands, biting on his fist, and saying, I wish I would have taken the path of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he's complaining about his bad friend. And he uses two words that are never used together in the Quran except here. Ya waylata laytani, in Shakespearean English, right? Woe to me, and all that stuff. We don't even talk like that. But basically, he's really upset with himself. How could I let this happen? How could I let this happen? Laytani, woe to me, how could I allow this to happen? I wish I never took that person as a friend. But here's the part that's really amazing. Why does he say, I wish I did not take that person as a friend? It's amazing. I never thought of it this way until honestly I was on the plane reading the Quran. I was reading Surah Al-Furqan and I said, that's amazing. The reason, I never thought about it, I always, I go back to the story from the Seerah and, obviously following the path of the Messenger, ignoring your friends. But what's the reasoning he gave? لَقَدْ أَضَلَّنِي عَنِ الذِّكْرِ بَعْدَ إِذْ جَاءَنِي. He removed me, he guided, he led me astray from the reminder after it came to me. And I'm just going to think about that, subhanAllah, how many times that happens in our modern days. Someone is this close to becoming religious, this close to becoming good. Heard a really good halaqah, listened to a really good khutbah, or watched something on YouTube that inspired him. He's this close. Then his friend calls him up and says, hey man, what you doing tonight? What's up for tonight? What are we doing tonight? And he goes to that environment and he forgets everything. Everything. And it's like, what happened? You're worse than before you came to the halaqah. Because another wall or another opportunity for that person to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been torn down. The dhikr came to him. The reminder came to him. He had the opportunity. He was this close. He was accepting it. He was embracing it. Even in the story, he actually accepted Islam. Then, oh man, you're going to follow him? Seriously? This is what you're going to do? I don't want to have anything to do with you then. You're not cool anymore, right? Who do you think you are? So he went back on that, but he was there, right? And a lot of times you see Muslim youth that were there. I was there, I was close, I felt it, I felt the Imam rush, I felt the Imam boost, I wanted to be a good Muslim. Then my friends called, then I got the text message, then I went on Facebook, then I forgot everything. You're going to hate that person on the day of judgment. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us on the other hand, Allah, the group of Jannah, everyone coming together, meeting around in Jannah, sitting on their thrones and things of that sort, and they're asking each other, inquiring about their lives, hey, what was going on, what did you do, what did you do? One of them says, hey, I used to have this friend. He used to say to me, are you really going to believe this stuff? Like when we die and we become dirt, we're going to be revived? Seriously? Come on, man, leave that nonsense. Right? He's remembering, this person in Jannah is remembering all this stuff. When his friend used to talk to him and say, oh man, you're becoming religious, stop. You're changing, you need to stop this. You're being brainwashed by these shuyukh, you're being brainwashed in the masajid, you're becoming a sellout, you think you're better than me, blah, blah, bombarding him, right? And subhanAllah, Only one of the Mufassirin is Zamakhshari, he pointed this out. قَالَ هَلْ أَنْتُمْ مُطَّلِعُونَ. He said to those guys in Jannah, and he said, do you guys want to go see what happened to him? فَطَّلَعَ instead of فَطَّلَعُوا. فَطَّلَعَ means he went and he looked. Not فَطَّلَعُوا, because the other guys weren't very interested. You can go find your friend. We're going to hang out in Jannah and chill. You can go see what happened to your friend if you want. He was interested. He said, فَطَّلَعَ فَرَآهُ فِي سَوَاءِ الْجَحِيمِ. And he saw him in the lowest point of Jannah. And he said to him, what? تَاللَّهِ إِن كِدْتَ لَتُرْدِينَ. By Allah, you almost got me. I almost listened to you. You almost led me astray. إِن كِدْتَ لَتُرْدِينَ. وَلَوْلَا نِعْمَةُ رَبِّي لَكُنْتُ مِنَ الْمُحْضَرِينَ. If it wasn't Allah blessing me and saving me, I would have been where you are. I would have been just like you. SubhanAllah, He doesn't care about this person anymore. You almost got me. You almost made me fall, but it didn't work. Now what's the unifying traits between the person who gives implicit approval to sin and the guy who after the reminder came to him was led astray? He had a passive and weak personality. He wasn't strong enough. You have to know how to hold your own as a Muslim. You've got to be able to have a strong enough personality that you change your environment doesn't change you. That if you're around people that are lower than you in Iman, you make them better in Iman. And if you're around people that are higher than you in Iman, you try to reach that level. But you have to be able to hold your own as a Muslim. You have to have a strong personality. Otherwise, you can be one of two. Either you can be a silent devil, someone who's witnessing falsehood, or you can be someone who fell into it because although he was close, although he felt it, like he was getting close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, somebody called him up, somebody led him back to that path. And by the way, this continues for your entire life. People think peer pressure is, high school pimpled kids, sitting around and oh dude, let's go do this. People limit peer pressure to a very simplistic definition. It's not that. Peer pressure continues at 50, 60, 70 years old. People still have peer pressure. You're still trying, if you're a weak personality, you're still trying to go with the flow. You're still trying to do what everybody else is doing. Peer pressure continues. It just takes on a more sophisticated form, but it continues. Your entire life, it continues. Unless you have a strong enough personality where you hold your own to the point where you're not shy of your good deeds. You're not shy of being the religious guy. You're not arrogant, but you're not shy. And there's a fine line between those two. You're not being judgmental, you're not telling people, you're not thinking that you're better than them, but at the same time, you're not going to tolerate their stuff. And you're not going to allow it to happen on your watch. Not in front of me. You can go sin however much you want outside. Whatever you want to do, not in front of me. I'm not going to tolerate it. You're not going to do it in my car. You're not going to do it around me. You're not going to do it while in our chill session. You're going to go do it somewhere else. Not in my house, not on my watch. It's not going to happen. Think about that when you have that personality. That is something that was consistent with all of the companions of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When they saw something, they changed it. They changed it. And if you truly love that person, I'll end with one hadith. Beautiful hadith, which really shows us the task of the Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar, enjoining good and forbidding evil. The Prophet ﷺ gives us this analogy of a ship. You got some people on the top deck, some people on the bottom deck. The people on the bottom deck don't want to disturb the people on the top deck and ask them for water, so what do? They put a hole in the bottom of the ship and start getting water from the ocean. Think about that. And the people on the top deck don't bother to come give them water. So what happens to the ship? The entire ship sinks. What a beautiful analogy. You've got to want to save your brothers. You've got to want to help them. But whenever they turn away, then you hate it on the inside. And Nawawi rahimahullah says that hating it on the inside means you shun those people. You don't want to change? I tried with you. I'm going to do my thing and I'm going to hate it on the inside. You do your thing. SubhanAllah. But I'm going to try to give you water. I'm going to try to give you water and I'm not going to let you. You might die out of something else. You might die out of having some weird seasickness. But you're not going to drill a hole in my ship. I'm going to give you water. So you're not going to die of thirst. SubhanAllah, think about that. So try to save people, but not at the expense of your own iman. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us, inshallah. I'm going to